Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this ECIA webinar. The topic for today is about human capital, diversity, and talent management that has been ranked as top risk in the last Risk and Focus publication issue a month ago. It's a great pleasure to discuss this topic because I think this is really very important for all the chief audit and audit manager in the community to take care of this risk that is increasing every year significantly and that will increase in the very short future. It's also important because we have seen that the pandemic had a very high impact in terms of skills shortage, but also new way of working. The economical situation is also impacting this issue with all the wage inflation that is impacting all the different people in the various organizations. And last but not the least, psychological aspects are becoming also very important. That's why human capital is a capital to manage as well as the others, and as important for sure as the financial and the environmental and other capitals. So let me introduce to you our facilitator for the day, who is Marco Rosenberg. He's currently the Chief Audit Executive of Booking Holding Group. He has a very long experience in internal audit, was the Chief Audit Executive of Heineken before and started his career with PwC. Marco is also very active with the IIA community, so thank you for that. You are a board member of IIA Netherlands and you are also a member of the Industrial Committee of ECIA. So thank you for that, Marco. I will just, before giving the floor to you, share two logistic details with the participants. The first one is about the Slido. So we will use Slido for the Q&A at the end of the session, but also for polls that we will have during the webinar today. So please connect to Slido with the QR code that you have here on the screen, or download Slido on your PC and use the code RIFHumanCapital to join us. And last but not the least, I think that many of us would like to get some CPA certificate, and you will be able to ask for them at the end of the session through Slido, and we will keep Slido open for that until the end of the day today, so that you have time to fill in the document and request for your certificate. So now, Marco, let me give you the floor.
Thank you, Pascal. It's great to see the huge interest in the topic with the number of persons participating today. Let me clarify two things here at the start. You might wonder, what is Booking Holdings, the company I work for? It's actually the US parent above Booking.com, which probably most of you are more familiar with. We have a number of other brands as well, all travel related. And the other thing is, I was actually not the head of audit for Heineken. Unfortunately, I was the head of audit for Europe and IT globally. I'm an IT auditor by background, hence just this quick clarification. Yeah, let's have a look at the agenda for today. So we'll quickly look at the results from the latest Risk in Focus, specifically on human capital, diversity, and talent management. We have a number of poll questions for which we will use Slido, as just explained by Pascal. And then we'll have a discussion with our panelists for today. And then at the end, we have a Q&A session. And again, the questions will be retrieved from Slido. So please do submit your questions if and when they come up. So first of all, yeah, let's introduce the panelists. We have Letitia Robillard, we have Antonio de Frutos and Dermot Byrne. And instead of me trying to introduce them, we want to give them each 1 minute to tell us a bit about their background. So maybe Letitia, you want to go first? Perhaps you're still on mute.
Yes, it's okay. Sorry. So, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and thanks. Really, it's great pleasure for me to be part of this session on human resource. So briefly, I am part of the Sanofi pharma industry group. I joined the audit team 3 years ago. Up to December this year, I am heading the internal audit for Europe, and starting early January, I will take over R&D and medical affairs audit scope within the organization. The reason I am here today with you is because since 2 years, I had the chance to develop and implement culture audit within Sanofi, and I will continue, I can tell you, in the coming years. But about my background, so I am medical doctor by training plus MBA. Most of my career was in marketing and commercial function in pharma, in affiliate, GSK, AstraZeneca. Then I joined Sanofi for a more global position in commercial, and always motivated by novelty and innovation. Before joining audit, I was heading new product organization in charge of focus on the cardiovascular. And as physician, marketer, and now in audit, I realize what is driving myself is to be able to find the levers that make people move and to be able to activate those levers to get concrete outcome. And that's why I really want to share with you this culture checkup project we develop in Sanofi.
Thank you, Letitia. Antonio, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Marco. Okay, it's a great pleasure for me to be here, to have been invited to this webinar about human capital. To talk a bit about me, my name is Antonio de Frutos, and I have been working as an auditor for the past 25 years. First, as an external auditor, financial auditor in PwC for 10 years, and then 15 years ago, I joined the BBVA. BBVA is an international bank with the headquarters located in Spain, but with big franchises in Mexico, in Turkey, in South America, Europe, etc. I work for the internal audit department. I'm in charge of the discipline and portfolio team, dealing with methodology, the follow-up of production, the build-up of the audit plan. And the reason I'm here is because I'm taking part with the institutes of internal auditors in Spain in a technical document about the audit of the corporate culture. So since corporate culture is quite related to the topic today, so they asked me if I can participate, and I'm very happy to share the view about the audit of human capital in the BBVA group.
Excellent. Thank you, Antonio. And then last but not least, Dermot, over to you.
Thank you, Marco. My name is Dermot Byrne. I'm head of the Internal and EU Audit Unit here in the Ministry of Public Expenditure and Reform. The first half of my career was spent as an auditor in our National Audit Office, so my experience is almost 100% public sector. I moved to the Ministry of Finance to head up the European Audit Unit back in the late 90s, and in 2011 we took over the internal audit function. No sooner had we done that than the Ministry of Finance split into two. The old Ministry of Finance, which has been there since 1922, in fact just about to celebrate its birthday, and the new Ministry of Public Expenditure and Reform, which is where I'm based. And by its nature, as you can imagine, it is the ministry responsible for the reform agenda. I'm probably here because we carried out a review of culture in the Ministry of Public Expenditure and Reform over the last couple of years, and we're busy in the implementation phase. The only other thing I would add is that I'm lucky to be internal audit for two different organizations where I'm able to compare and contrast culture and practices in one, an old government department, and two, a new government department, which has given me some insights that I didn't expect to have. Thank you, Marco.
Excellent. So let's move ahead with the slides, then we can get into the topic. Yeah, there we go. So first of all, one slide to explain a little bit what do we see with regards to human capital, diversity, and talent management. So the risk in focus research includes the views of over 800 heads of internal audit from over 15 European countries. And they, again, similar to last year, rated this topic as one of the top 5 risks for their company. You can see that the percentage even went up a bit from 40% to 50% this year. And obviously, it's a very broad topic. And also in our own company, we as internal audit, we are also responsible for enterprise risk management. And also for us, it's in the top of the enterprise risks for the company. If you break down the various topics, as you can see here on the slide on the left-hand side, it's many different dimensions. And one, of course, is the hybrid ways of working that we all had to get used to during COVID. Well, that was remote, and now, of course, from remote to hybrid. And kind of what role do we play there? We see that it delivers some challenges for companies to, for instance, onboard new employees. It's about engagement. It's about establishing culture. While you're not all in the same place that we used to work like in prior to COVID. A talent shortage, of course, which goes to, of course, topics like attrition, recruitment. We faced a very tough labor market in the last couple of years, especially for technology talent, for ourselves, developers, very hard to find. Of course, these things also change very rapidly. In the last 2 months, we've seen quite a change in the labor market. I think I read in the Wall Street Journal 140,000 tech resources were laid off in the last 2 months. So that really does change the dynamics of this risk as well. And especially also attracting young employees and what are they looking for in a job and what are they expecting from a company and from a purpose point of view, values, etc. And which then brings us also to diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of which, of course, are extremely important these days to remove barriers, make sure that everyone has a fair chance and feel included in the workplace and are able to deliver their best work. I mentioned already alignment with purpose and values, psychological well-being, and safety are very important. So again, it's a very diverse topic with lots of different topics. And the question is, well, how do we cover that as in internal audit, or do we break that down and then cover each item separately? And as a last point on this slide, I think we're all very familiar with the harder type of controls, and the controls you can put in a work program, you can test, you can get evidence for, etc. But of course, to cover the topics here on this slide, on this page, requires also softer controls and a focus on culture and behavior, which I think for many of us is a new element to the work. So if we move to the next slide, we can have a quick look at a number of the results from Risk in Focus. Can we switch to the next slide, please? Thank you. So here you can see, oh yeah, up one. I think can we go up one slide? Pascal, can we go? Yeah, there we are. All right. So here, this is the first graph that I just wanted to spend a couple of seconds on. So you can see here that the human capital, diversity, talent management risk was rated second on the list, just behind cybersecurity. Last year, it was rated fourth. So you see that the risk is also is increasing, is ranking up higher. And 18% of the respondents actually called this risk out to be their #1 priority. You can also see, indeed, between 2022 and 2023, that the risk has increased somewhat. So if we look at the next slide, please, we will see that. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, there we are. So although this risk was on the top of the list on the previous slide, so there's a top top risk considered by the chief audit executives. You can see that's actually on the bottom half of this slide when it comes to how much time and effort do we spend. Now you could potentially add up the topic above. You can see organizational culture. So if you would add those two risks up, you might get to a higher position on the graph. But I think most of us are still struggling how to deal with this topic. And do you add it to most of the audits just as one element or one part of your work program? Or do you actually perform a separate audit specifically on one of these topics under this header? So I think that's an interesting takeaway. You can see the gap also in the size of the bar. The yellow bar, it's a much bigger risk priority than time that we spend on it. And then let's go to the next slide. So here, I think we have some trouble flipping the slides, but we'll get there. So if you go back up one, you will see that if you look at how the risk has trended over the last couple of years. Well, let me just speak over. Yeah, there we go. So this is the percentage of participants of the chief audit executives who rated this risk top of in the top 5 of the risk. So you can see the dark blue line is the human capital, diversity, and talent management, and it has steadily increased over the years, kind of a straight line up. And you can see some of the other risks that are trending up, of course, macroeconomic, geopolitical uncertainty. I'm sure that will rise further in the next 12 months with everything that's going on in the world. But of course, also climate change, environment going up quite steadily, and the supply chain risks, especially with the impact of COVID, the supply chain disruptions, etc. But on top of the list, it's the increase in the risk that we're talking about today. And then let's 2 more slides before we head to the poll. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here it's an unchanged kind of picture compared to the first graph we looked at. So this is for the next 5 years, what risks will we face? Actually 3 years from now, but it's still human capital is still on position number 2, also cybersecurity unchanged from number 1. And then finally on this slide, indeed, you see a slight increase in how much time heads of audit expect to spend on the topic. So I think that's a positive result. And hopefully with some of the results of the webinar today, we might all feel even more confident to spend time on the topics that we're discussing right now. So I think if we then move to the first Slido poll question. And hopefully you all managed to scan the QR code and log on to Slido. So the question here is, does your internal audit function currently play a role with regard to culture in your organization? And as you can see, you can answer yes, assurance, advisory, or not at all. So we'll give that a couple of seconds for all of you to reply. So I see we're over 100 respondents already, so that's going well. I think we probably have most of the respondents. I don't see any new ones coming in. So it's interesting score, kind of equal on the advisory role versus the assurance role, about 1/3 of us. But the majority still does not spend time on culture. I think what I do see in my own organization is that often culture is measured in engagement surveys, in some cases, if necessary, maybe a compliance review, also linked to the code of conduct. And in our case as well, we do touch upon it, but it's typically part of an audit on a different type of topic. So it's also for us still a challenge. I think we're done with this question. So let's look at the next one, please. So in this case, the question is, do you play a role with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And so we'll give that a couple of seconds. I think what I see in my organization is diversity is quite measurable, depending on what you're allowed to measure in which country, of course. But typically you can get some real data on this topic. Equity and inclusion, I think in my experience, are a lot softer. And you might look at things like training, etc., around the topics, but definitely harder to tackle than diversity. Also, what standards might you use if you want to audit that topic? So I think here, compared to culture, this is definitely, I think, a bit further away for us, with 65% no. I was, by the way, also surprised on the previous question that we still also saw 1/3 of us in an advisory role. We have a question for the panelists later on that topic. How do you play that role as an advisor? So we'll dig into that a bit further in a couple of minutes. All right, let's go to the third poll question, please. And that will be the last question before we'll switch to the panel. So the question here is, do you spend time on talent management in your organization? I think in my experience here, so that there are some real kind of processes that you can audit. I also think about recruitment, for instance, which I think gets quite close to our experience as internal audit. And we also cover this topic as part of enterprise risk management. So again, it seems as the final answers come through that about 1/3 of us do play a role, and especially with regards to assurance on this item. But again, with most of us in the category, we don't spend time on it. So a great opportunity, I think, for all of us to explore and see how we can play our role with regards to this topic. So let's open it up and we'll give the panelists an opportunity to share their experiences. The first question here is a broad one. What role do you play in your organization with regards to the human factor? And Letitia, can I invite you to share your views first?
For sure, thank you, Marco. So as I said in your introduction, I had a chance to co-develop and implement the activity around the culture audit that we call culture checkup, because it's an advisory audit. And when our CEO, Paul Hudson, joined the company in 2019 and defined the new strategy for Sanofi named Play to Win, culture change has been identified as one of the key pillars to drive our strategy in Sanofi. And in that context, at the third line of defense, focusing on risk and risk of non-transformation being mapped at a risk, we engage ourselves to develop the culture checkup activities. Briefly, what is a culture checkup? 4 points, in 4 points. First of all, the culture checkup is an end-to-end, in-depth qualitative and quantitative assessment performed by a multidisciplinary team composed of human resource, so either human business partner or organization development people, and our auditors team. Second point, it's based on a strict methodology and tools that we develop in partnership with the company who develops the Pay to Win culture for the group. And we inspire also from two pharma, Novo Nordisk and GSK, who develop that product 10 years ago. The culture checkup gathers data on behaviors, symbol, and system to extract insight and to provide to the leadership team we check up 2 or 3 priorities they need to focus on to accelerate the transformation. The data are coming from where? Either from interview, from focus group, survey, or meeting observation, and are coded to extract the main insight. Therefore, we can manage a number of information, and I would say by culture checkup, we gather more or less around 500 to 800 data insight. And also, by this methodology of coding, we ensure no bias between groups and between various culture checkup teams. Third point, considering the level of resource needed, which is important, it's around 4 people participating to culture checkup, we focus our effort on strategic part of the organization. So key strategic country, key strategic organization at global level. Finally, manage as an advisory audit, this culture checkup ensure our position in change as a change agent, which is a position we want to develop in Sanofi internal audit. So it's a double gain, I would say, offer within the organization. That's for the culture checkup for Sanofi.
Excellent. Thank you, Laetitia. Would you say that the results are mostly aimed at providing assurance or rather advice and yeah, maybe consultancy?
As of today, it's more consultancy. It has based on the consultancy, but we envisage to transform at some point in insurance. As soon as when the culture will be at the expected level we want, we expect after 3 years, we expect to go in a more assurance approach rather than a pure consultancy.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, great to hear that. Dermot, anything to add there to what Laetitia shared with us?
Yeah, a lot of parallels with Laetitia's approach. Back in January 2020, we began a review of culture in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, first of all, to try and analyse what is the as-is position in the organisation. We did that by focus group discussions, interviews with both internal and external stakeholders. And I would stress that the external stakeholder piece is very important for us because the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, as the name suggests, is the fiscal manager of the economy. In other words, the ministry that sort of oversees the budgets of all the other ministries in Ireland. So not necessarily a very popular job during an economic downturn when really money is being very tight. So the review identified 6 cultural traits in the department, not saying they're good or bad, sometimes they can be neutral, but to try and identify, you know, some particular traits that would be worth developing and some maybe tweaking a bit. So I'll finish really the main traits that we found in the department where there's strong leadership. There's a collegiate atmosphere in teams, but maybe the teams don't communicate well with each other, you know, in different divisions of the department. People were trusted to make decisions. It's a professional organization which welcomes professionalism and indeed welcomes challenge. It has a strong policy focus, as you would imagine, because this is a policy department. We don't spend much money other than on salaries and wages and expenses, but that the decision making was very evidence based in the department. These were the main features that we pulled out of the review.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Let's have a look at our second question, and then we'll ask Antonio to comment on this one first. So this is about how to deal with the human factor as part of the audit. Antonio, yeah, what can you share with us?
Well, our global strategy in internal audit is to accompany the human resources area along its roadmap for human capital. I mean, talent management, hybrid workplace, ESG initiatives related to staff, of a comprehensive view. Our approach from internal audit is different depending on the maturity of the related projects. For fully implemented projects, we address them through assurance engagements. In case we are talking about ongoing or not fully implemented projects, we use an advisory approach. So we use both, mainly assurance, because we are focused on hard controls so far, but we are open to give advice in these cases that the maturity is lower. Usually we perform thematic audits, fully focused in the human capital aspects. Of course, the human factor is included in every one of our reviews because sometimes root causes of the weaknesses we identified are related to a lack of proper training, work overload, or other people-related factors. But so far, we don't have a specific area of our reports, including an opinion on the human capital for every audit. In terms of topics we have covered, during 2022, we have performed different audit engagements, touching different topics such as the health and safety in the labor place, which is quite a traditional one, let's say, talent management, recruitment and payroll, training, and since pandemic period, we have performed several check-in of the remote working place practices and procedures. Regarding diversity, equality, and inclusion, well, we have here a dedicated team in charge of ESG aspects, and we are tracking closely the roadmap of our company in relation to these aspects. What are we doing, basically? Well, we are checking the integration of diversity, equality, and inclusion in traditional human resources processes, such as selection, recruitment, promotion, salary, payment, etc. We are reviewing if the organization is in compliance with diversity and equality goals established by management. We review the quality and completeness of the non-financial data and reporting related to these topics. Evaluate the risk of social washing, which is a risk quite relevant now, in my opinion, and checking if we are ready for new facets of these aspects, like, for example, age inequality, which is, probably in the future is going to be more important. In the case of labor safety, our approach is to incorporate in our traditional reviews aspects related to mental health and well-being in order to check if the organization is integrating these components. And finally, human rights. Well, this is a global compromise that touches diversity of aspects, including our staff, working conditions, etc. But I think it's quite comprehensive view that we are developing. It's quite recent, this approach. We are not doing this for many years, but we are quite well focused for the future.
Well, it sounds like you have progressed a lot since. Thank you for that. Let's have a look at two more polling questions, and then we'll go back to the panel again. Can we move to the next slide? Here we are. So here the question is, do we currently play a role with regards to the transition to hybrid ways of working? That's time to get your phone out of the pocket again. Let's see. And as the answers come in, and the experience that I have with my department is we looked, for instance, at the cybersecurity impact of working from home, use of virtual private networks, the increase we saw with regards to phishing attempts, etc. in that period as well. But that's just one example. We'll give that a couple more seconds. So also here, the majority of us do not play a role. Okay, and then let's look at the next one on. Oh, we still have some answers coming in. I was a little bit too quick. But I think that the results do not change drastically, I think. And the last one, yeah, on psychological well-being. So let's see. So here in again, I can share one of our practices. We have ethics ambassadors throughout the company, where people might raise items with regards to psychological well-being, and one or two of our team members are also in that role. We haven't actually done audits or reviews on this topic specifically, as I see the majority of us in the room are on that same page. Okay. So again, I think similar to the last round of questions, there's still quite a lot of opportunity for us to get involved and think about, do we have a role to play, and if so, how do we play that role? All right, so let's go back to the panel. Maybe we can get some useful tips and good practices. So I think the first one, it's rather broad, but let's look at this question in light of the topic of today, human capital. So what tips do you have to increase the influence of internal audit in an advisory role? And maybe this time, Dermot, maybe you want to kick us off with an answer.
Yeah, thanks, Marco. I suppose since we took over internal audit in 2011 in the two organisations, we've been trying constantly, but perhaps slowly, to move from that assurance role to an equal advice and insight role. And I suppose it was a little bit easier in my two ministries because they're not commercial organisations. Finances of the organisation aren't the highest risks very often. They're risks in the economy, risks related to staff. So we've carried out regular audits on recruitment processes, training processes, and indeed our culture review, as you can guess, given that it started in January 2020, was interrupted by COVID. So we had to revisit those 6 cultural traits that I mentioned and try and establish were they affected by the COVID crisis. And essentially, we found that they weren't. The big issues that emerged, and this is where we could add something in an advisory role in internal audit, is what is the effect of blended working? When we carried out audits of health and safety perhaps 5 years ago, the risk were, will somebody slip and fall off a staircase, or will they slip on a slippery floor? Now we're more concerned with the psychological well-being of our people who work at home or work in the office. And equally, it has an effect on recruitment and staffing, in the sense that, will we be able to recruit people if we impose solutions on them, for instance, that they must come into the office? Because in a competitive market, the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform and the Department of Finance perhaps would be unwise to insist on staff being present in the office when other accountancy firms and other like organisations are offering staff a more, how would I say, better life balance approach to blended working. So it's not just a life issue, it's a competitive issue too, where we're trying to recruit the best staff.
Yeah, and then in this advisory role, do you wait until you're asked in to provide advice, or do you proactively go and provide that advice more proactively?
No, we try in our business plan, in our audit plan for each year, to have perhaps 50% of the assignments as consultative advisory assignments. And very often these are around the business processes, which include, health and safety, recruitment, etc. It might be interesting to note that in the public sector, a culture review is somewhat of a brave step to take, because with freedom of information, nothing is a secret. And of course, management of government departments would be rightly nervous of a negative culture review. So I'm inclined to try and look at it from the point of view of sustainability and the social aspects of sustainability, to try and, we'll say, bring a more hesitant government department into the fold by asking them to look at, engagement, diverse and inclusive workforce, relationships with other organisations as part of an overall audit plan. and the role of internal audit in sustainability is now difficult to say argue with, and I think that's one way we can push this advisory focus on both human recruitment, engagement, and health and safety issues.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Letitia, anything to add on this topic from your practices?
Alors, from our practices, and I will come back on the culture checkup because I think it is one of the topics today. And about tips, I think we could not have succeed with the COMEX without our CEO. And because, first of all, we leverage a lot the interest of our CEO to share the finding with the COMEX and the Human Resource Leadership Team meeting. Once a year, we consolidate all the learning. And really, at that time, what raised the interest of this COMEX is really because they listen to lively example. They hear about collaborators' insights on topics that are normally they do not take into account, and they realize the importance of this. And also because during those review of key learning after 1 year of culture checkup, we came back with some proposal of change. And for example, in one of our value, we have behavior, we have things Sanofi first, and it has been not well understood by the collaborators. I think that the family need to go after Sanofi, so we change, and the proposal from the culture team afterwards has to be it's things one Sanofi. You know, it is type of things. Another tips also with the audit committee. We present, so our head of internal audit and risk management present after 1 year and a half what were the outcome for the audit from the culture checkup. Initially, no reaction, but afterwards, 1 month after, the head of the audit committee come back and ask a lot of questions and very interested on what. And next time, so we will present also the evolution and how the company is evolving regarding the culture implementation, because it's a key strategic level. So I would say it's either through the CEO traction or either by pushing and putting in front of everybody that change the culture is a key pillar for Sanofi. Finally, that we manage the interest of our people within the organization.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that example. All right, let's spend a couple of minutes on the last question, and then we'll open it up and see what questions we might have gotten from the participants. But so the final question here is around: do we need a special type of internal auditor, a special profile, and to be successful in auditing the human factor? And Letitia, I know we ended with you on the last question, but in our pre-discussion, I think you had some good insights here as well. So let me start with you.
Yeah, no problem. So about for the human resource, I would say process. As of today, there is no specialization from our auditor. But now more and more, we gain to have more experts in the function. So we envisage, to recruit some dedicated people if we will increase the audit on people management. In the case of the culture checkup, it's a little different. After performing some pilots and decision to continue, we decided 1 year ago to recruit someone dedicated to team lead those culture checkup, with a cultural background, and this person came from an external company outside pharma, very specialized in culture, and also with strong business mindset, and also on all D&I aspect at corporate level. And so this person, which name is Magali, is not an auditor, so she has been trained on the audit methodology, the tool. But also now she's working with other auditors who are not specialized. So she's a specialized in culture. She works with other auditors not specialized, with human resource also, people, and those teams are performing 5 culture checkup per year on the culture checkup, sorry. And the last topic, just I want to insist on, for the auditor who are not specialized and collaborating to the culture checkup, it's for them, it's really, and I come back from the US on Friday, and they say it's really a plus for their development, either as a Sanofi employee, but also for their next career, but also for the audit. And they develop a lot of skill in terms of soft skill, better understanding how decisions are taken because they are attending some leadership meeting. So I think it's really a plus for their development as auditor. Sorry, it's too long, but needs to be said.
Yeah. Diversity, very important, also within the internal audit team itself. Antonio, any final comments before we move to the Q&A part?
Okay, well, as Leticia said, we here in VBA don't have specialized auditors for human capital reviews, as we do have for other type of more, let's say, technical, like cybersecurity or risk models. On the other hand, it's true that probably the level of complexity of this kind of audits is higher than traditional transaction processing reviews. So probably we need auditors with specific soft skills to deal with these topics. What we have here is a knowledge model that we use for all auditors. It contains detailed information about the skills, the technical knowledge, past experience of everyone in our area, and it allows us to choose the best profiles for each audit. Our risk taxonomy is built around 20 risks. One of these is people, is human capital. The other one is ESG. So for each one of these risks, we have the level of skills, the level of knowledge, so we can choose the best profiles for performing every audit. And of course, here, training is very important. So we are identify training needs for our staff every year, and we identify the gaps in knowledge considered the audit plan. So my expectation is that in the near future, probably if these human capital reviews grow or became more important, probably we will have to at least cover the gaps we have right now, and maybe, who knows, hire some specialists to deal with corporate culture and human capital audits.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for that. I think it's very inspirational to hear all of your experiences in this area, and also from different industries, from banking, public sector, the industry, etc. So very helpful to have those examples shared here today. Let's see what questions we might have gotten through the Slido tool. Here we are. I'll give that a couple of seconds to see. I think you can also vote on other people's questions. And if you see a question that you might share as well, you can just click the little thumbs up icon there. And let's see, let's just start with the top one. So the question here is, how do we collaborate with HR departments on these matters? Let's see, I don't, maybe panelists just speak up if you have something to share, because I don't see any, I cannot see you actually at this point in time on my screen.
Thanks, Marco. I may, if I go ahead of Leticia.
Yeah, go.
It's absolutely crucial. Our review of culture was a partnership between internal audit and HR, and I'm delighted that that question was asked, because I think it would be impossible to carry out a review of culture without that partnership piece. It certainly worked very well for us. One of the earlier questions was around the implementation process. We are still involved in the implementation side, which I was a little bit nervous about at the beginning. Am I beginning to become part of the control environment as opposed to the audit environment? But I think it's been useful for us to maintain that involvement in the implementation, if nothing else, to keep the organisation honest. And really what I'm trying to point the department towards is a maturity model for culture, whereby we can measure where we are now or where we were in 2020 and try to aim for a higher level up that maturity model where we would like to be either this year, next year, or in 3 years' time. So yeah, HR essential.
If I may to complete on the human resource collaboration, I think what we perform with the culture checkup help a lot to better collaborate with human resource for the other type of audit, because now we are in close collaboration with them, and they propose also some assignment to be performed. So I think it's by entering by an advisory audit in some topic, it helps also to work with them and working in action plan mode. So it's really the way we work, and this year it has changed a lot, and they were very active in the identification of the of some assignment for next year. So yes, good collaboration thanks to advisory assignment.
Excellent. Yeah, my own experience, we actually got a request from the HR department a couple of years ago to look at their recruitment process because they knew it was not functioning very well at that point in time, and they really could use an outside pair of eyes to help them identify everything that need to be improved and help them with an improvement plan. So again, very helpful to have that collaboration in place. I think what I see on my screen now as the number one question is also more internally focused tips on recruiting and retaining talents within internal audit itself. So maybe Antonio, we haven't heard from you yet in the Q&A session. Any tips there that you might want to share?
Yeah, my tip here is that from internal audit, we need a good value proposition, let's say, for all auditors joining the function. I mean, we have the example of ESG. We created, as I said, a specific unit in internal audit for ESG purposes and the reviews. This is quite a hot topic in the moment here. It's a huge initiatives and projects. And we created a specific training program to them with the help, of course, of the organization. And they are in the first line of this development in the ESG. So make our function interesting for them in these new topics and offer them a good training and explaining. I think audit is a function, is a job that it helps people careers to develop and is with a very steep learning curve. And this is what we have to, let's say, sell to them. Probably, I don't know if we can be competitive in terms of salary with other units, depending probably in the market, but we have other things to offer to the auditors.
Anything to add, Letitia, Dermot, on this one?
Yes, if I may, so we have, I think we have first of all a mandate about 3 years with our auditors. When they came here in our group, it's for 3 years as auditors. And then afterwards, for some, we propose some management positions. So it's more to evolve management or sole team of auditors, management position or expert position to keep things a little longer. But in average, we don't try to fidelize because we saw that at the end, there are less efficiency if they stay too long in the same position. So that's the way we are managing.
Okay. Thanks for that. If I look here, so we have another question here, number 2 on my screen at least, whether the CEOs recognize human capital to be a main risk, even more so compared to geopolitical risk or macro or environmental risks. I don't know if anyone can share their experiences on this.
Yes, I can say something. I mean, one of the strategic priorities of BBVA is the human, the team. So in my experience, it's not difficult to explain the board or audit committee or president of the company that this is very important matter. I don't know, we are a financial services company. Maybe it's a bit different to a factory or something like that, but I understand that most of the CEOs or boards are aware that this is a key risk for the organization?
I think in any organization, the culture is often top down. In other words, the views of the management board and the chief executive have a huge influence. In my example, the Secretary General of a government department is essentially the chief executive officer. And when I went to the two ministries to ask them would they be interested in a review of culture, one said yes, quite quickly, which told me a lot about the top-down culture in the organization, even before we carried out the review. So I think the willingness to take on this type of study, this type of advisory or consultative advice from internal audit will tell you a lot. In other words, if they agree to it, I think you know a little bit more than before you started.
Yeah. All right. Well, I actually had a couple of conversations with our CEO on this risk, and I think the one thing that we try to explain is how pervasive this risk is. And it's more or less a trigger for many of the other risks, including supply chain or environmental. You need to have the right talent to manage all the other risks as well. So in that sense, it's quite a pervasive risk to manage. So we have a couple of other questions, but Pascal, maybe it's better to switch back to you for some closing remarks before we run out of time and then we lose people on the call. So back to you.
Thank you, Marco. So let me maybe summarize what are some very important messages that we have learned today and that might be useful for all the participants. I think that first of all, it was interesting to see that many participants do not have any audit experience in this topic. So that's good. It means that hopefully it was useful for everyone. We went up to 291 people on the line, so a huge interest, and we still have 271 with us, so a good signal, a good KPI, if I may say so. More seriously, regarding culture, I think we learned from you, Laetitia, and thank you for that, how to do culture checkup, very interesting experience. We also heard that maybe coupling culture with sustainability can help, and tone at the top for all the culture aspects is very important to get support from the CEO, from the audit committee, and from the whole organization. Regarding human capital, I think there is still a way to go from advisory to assurance and to include maybe human capital in all the audits reports in the future. On the hybrid work, what we heard is that your experience is that the cyber risk is increasing. The well-being aspect of your auditors is maybe more difficult also to manage. And last but not the least, it's also an argument or a counter-argument in terms of recruiting. Regarding now human factors, so I think that most of you agree that having dedicated people for this aspect is important, and maybe looking at people with a very strong experience in culture, very strong experience in the DNA of the organization can help, and then teach audit to these people like Sanofi did. And last but not the least, from the Q&A, it's essential to collaborate with the HR department, and it's also essential to highlight the ESG aspect of the internal audit function when we try to recruit and attract people. So this is, I think, in a nutshell, the main takeaways that we have from today's session. Let me thank you, Marco, for the very strong facilitation on time, and despite the very small technical issue that we had. Sorry for that. You never know with internet how it's going to work. And thank you very much to all the panelists, and if I may, happy holidays to all of you, and thank you for your support, and looking forward for new webinars next year on very interesting topic. Thank you.
Thanks
a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.